Lautsprecher.
Hello everyone, can you hear us?
What's the delay? Do we have a 1 minute delay?
I'm not sure. Oh, someone says hi. So I guess we can start, right?
Sure, let's go.
Okay, that's good. So, hello and welcome everyone. This is the post-liquidity release live stream. Today we want to talk a bit about liquidity, the changes it brought, and what's going to happen next in the world of Prosperous universe. And today we're three in the live stream. Martin's the boss, say hi please.
Hello.
And then we have Fabian, our game designer. And I'm Malp, the programmer. So
Malp the programmer.
One of the programmers. There aren't many, unfortunately. Okay, someone says
you leveled down from creator of the universe last time to programmer this time.
Oh, that's true. That means reset, right? And I can do another universe.
Don't say that.
Oh,
I hear
sorry.
you're not supposed to say that out loud.
Yeah. All right. So audio seems to be fine. That's good. That didn't work last time. So
What?
let's start with the liquidity release, shall we? On my other screen, I have the release page open, and maybe we can just talk a bit about what's new in liquidity and why we did it, and maybe we can start with the loan contracts. If you follow the devlogs, you know that the contract system is kind of something we really think is integral to the game and how players play together and do business in the game. And when we released the first iteration of the contract system, I think the goal was originally to have a contract system where you could like combine any conditions into any contract with arbitrary deadlines and stuff like that, but it turned out that's quite difficult to do, and we settled for a simpler system which only has templates, and the first ones were obviously buy, sell commodities and shipping. And with liquidity we now added 3 new, is it 3? Yes, loan templates. Yep. And we didn't go full custom contracts yet because it's still difficult. But I think the new loan contracts really help players to interact and like help other players out with money where they would have otherwise to form really quirky local market contracts to do so. So this is the new system. And I'm especially interested in how you liked it and if you did it use already and how it is working for you. And
Yeah, I mean there were loan contracts before kind of, but those lived in private chats and
yeah.
Discord and were basically loose agreements, and now we kind of have them formalized in the game so that you actually have something on paper that says, hey, you actually need to pay this money back at some point.
Yeah. And one feature I like about the loan contracts is actually that the loan conditions fulfill themselves right before the deadline. Otherwise I think it would be too complicated because players would usually forget to fulfill in time, and then you had to extend, or if no one reacted, contracts would breach like after 24 hours or so. So I really like that.
Apparently we haven't reached the critical audience size yet to get an answer to your question.
Yeah. Okay, what else is there? in the liquidity release.
I mean, what maybe makes sense to mention in what basically is a kind of consequence of the loan contracts is that we rework the rating system so that it takes into account the value of a contract, which basically we had this big example of what if you have one loan that's like 10 million currency and then you have another loan that's 5 credits, and then both of them would have been the same in the old rating system basically, and now the one of them will actually be worth that much more for the rating as it also is in terms of currency attached to it. So that also, of course, applies to all the other contracts that kind of value the amount of commodities that are involved and stuff like that. But the loans are kind of the poster example that wouldn't really make sense if you don't value each contract in terms of how much it's actually worth.
Yeah. Actually, fun fact, one of the problems we had with the release came from how we handled the ratings in the past, because we had that activity rating, right? And that got removed, but we still keep a log of the activity of a player. So if you open the user command of any player, you can see just a single line that says, for example, active 3 days out of 7 in a week or so. And to generate those, we reuse the activity intervals. That's a technical term we use internally. And there was one condition where we created activity intervals for a player in an endless loop, and that led to one of the, or was cause of the crashes we saw when releasing liquidity. Yeah. But that got fixed, luckily. Yeah, I must say that was like 48, really intense 48 hours for me. Because
yes, it's been a long release. We've had smoother ones before.
Yeah.
Put it this way.
I like the smoother ones better.
Yeah. Do we have to remind people on Discord that there's a live stream going on?
I think we have a Discord event running, but you can post the link again.
Yes.
And talking about new features, we also have the leaderboards, right? And maybe we have to go into why we added them actually. And the reason, or one of the reasons I like best why we have them now is because it kind of makes it more transparent what players are doing and how good they are doing something. And especially the production leaderboards, where you can look up who's producing the most of a certain commodity, contact future contract partners, for example, or just find out which corporation is active in a certain area, and just use that information to contact them and like create new contracts. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, and I hope that works out. And I wonder if someone already uses it in that way.
Yeah, I think that's like maybe the second thing many people realize about the leaderboards, because when you hear leaderboards, the first thing you think is, oh, it's like a high score table and I can try to be the first in some of those categories, and it's to give people goals, and it works like that. And some people mentioned in the past that they would actually have to have leaderboards to have a goal to strive towards something, or to see how well they are doing compared to other players. But there's also this big statistics thing about them, where you can just dive into the data basically and see what people are doing in a way that you couldn't before, where you could ask in the chat like who is producing drinking water, and now you can basically look it up and contact them. And that's a huge deal, because it also kind of shows you that the game world is alive, and you don't have to like click every planet and find where are people located. You can just dive right in and see what's happening.
Yeah. So there's a question, aren't you afraid that the leaderboards might be used to push out new players from certain markets by old rich players? No, I'm not too afraid of that. Mostly because there's no single marketplace. There are lots of different ways to sell your commodities. And just because someone is very high on the leaderboard doesn't mean they own all the markets. So I wouldn't worry too much. But I mean, time will tell.
Didn't someone on Discord do an analysis of that?
Oh yeah, there was an interesting screenshot the other day.
At least of the status quo, like the way this is now. So it's going to be interesting to see how this matrix that they posted will develop over time.
Yeah, I can't just I cannot change because I'm recording from Discord, so I can't look it up. But it was basically a table that says how much market share the biggest 5 players have of a certain commodity, right?
Something like that, yes.
And there's one player who's producing large amounts of drinking water, I think it was. And I think they only own 10% of the market, or was it 20 or so? So there's plenty of room for smaller players to actually sell their goods.
I can't find it right now, but it's somewhere. It is, but it's on a... If I'm not mistaken, it's on a channel that you can only access if you support us by buying a supporter pack. that was nice. Nice plug, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So these very secret, very exclusive insights are being kept from you now. If you don't support us.
Yeah, and I was just about to release this week's devlog, but we ran into technical difficulties, so let's see when we can release it. But anyways, I wrote a bit about the leaderboard performance, and we are well aware that the leaderboards can take some time to load, and it's not quite working as we want to, but we'll fix that eventually. And there are quite a lot of smaller updates and tweaks in the liquidity release as well. Maybe Fabian, you can talk a bit about balancing changes.
Yeah, the balancing changes were they basically target a few of the more less direct strategies, like the hybrid HABs got more area efficient, for example, because it's just potentially more interesting to use those, because you kind of don't make one base where you have 100% pioneers or 100% settlers, but you split your workforces and have to figure out how to best do that with the hybrid HABs. So those get buffed a little bit, and in general, some of the alternative recipes, like the orchard recipes that use the fertile soil, I think they get buffed, and the some of the prefab recipes that are not the first ones that you'll use, but kind of the second order recipes. So those are kind of a bit more viable compared to the standard ones, and you'll run into situations more frequently where you have to decide on which ones of those to use. And then there was also the a little buff to the insulation that you need to settle on extremely hot planets, for example, which kind of makes that a bit more viable as well, and doesn't keep you away from those planets as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course we had the ship building changes, which made a lot of especially the more higher tier and more expensive stuff more viable. Buffed all the expensive engines basically, and also the shields, which aren't that expensive necessarily in the first place, but you have to replace the shields like you have to replace the hull, so that's why they also got a bit of a buff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just going through the release notes. We increased the HQ production bonus as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was. Yeah, it was pretty conservatively balanced before. Like when we introduce like a completely new type of bonus, we like to not overdo it, so that it doesn't like completely blow up everything. Yeah, but now it should be a bit more relevant, and you should have to take into consideration the location of your HQ a little bit more.
Yeah. Someone in the chat wrote, there's a big lag with contract user search times as well. Sometimes it seems to never even load. That's true, I experienced that as well, and I have a ticket for that. Hopefully we'll find the cause. Okay, now's the time to ask any questions about the liquidity release, if you have any.
Awkward silence.
Awkward silence, yes.
Yes, let's have some awkward silence. A moment of silence.
Okay, I mean, we can
All the
continue.
hours of downtime we had.
Yeah. So many. Oh. But maybe we can continue and come back to any questions later.
Maybe you have to give him some time, Michi.
Yeah, maybe another second or so.
See? There's questions.
Lots of questions. Someone says, love the lore about the downtime on the Discord. Are you talking about that short story that someone wrote? I liked that as well. It was really fun. Someone asks, is contract accept and send performance lower than it used to be? Oh, that's a good question. I'm not aware of any slower contract creation times, but we're not measuring them directly, so we have to look into that. But what definitely got faster is actually condition fulfillment. And that was one of the issues we had during or after the release of Liquidity. And I think I wrote about that in the devlog. And someone in the general chat, actually, on the global chat in the game, actually said and was asking themselves if a contract condition fulfillment got faster somehow, and they noticed, and that's quite amazing. Because I thought it was only a back-end thing, but yeah.
It was a bit of an oversight, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, we figured it out.
Yes. I mean, since we usually only send back a reply to the client once the respective operation has completed, it obviously would be faster for particularly large users or large companies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, there's another message about user lookup being pretty slow.
There have also been two other questions, like any more buffs for the hull plates upcoming. They still seem unfeasible.
Well, if they turn out to stay unfeasible, we will buff them again in the future. In general, we are always monitoring everything and looking at potential changes to the balancing. But it's an iterative process, and yeah, we don't want to jump too far into one or the other direction.
Yeah.
Right after that, someone asked, will you also implement deleting sent contracts that haven't been accepted yet?
Right now you can also...
recalling a contract, basically.
Recalling contract, yeah. Haven't thought about that yet. I mean, one could terminate a contract at that stage, obviously, but the other party would have to terminate as well. And if I'm not mistaken, a contract is being cancelled anyways after 48 hours of no answer from the other party. Contracts take so many clicks. Is a reduction in clicks in the works with the new UI? I'm not sure. Yeah, it takes a lot of clicks, I realize that. And yeah, we don't have a ticket for that, especially, but yeah, we can look into that. Making new contracts really requires lots of clicks, but using one contract recurringly is pretty nice, I think. But yeah, there's definitely room for improvement.
Someone's asking about the different types of loans. Oh, there's quite a few questions now. Pick your favorite, Michi.
The age-old question Low Strife mentions. We spoke about the equity calculations in the financial statements of the game, and it basically boils down to the question: if you produce something yourself, what is its value? And right now the value is 0, I think. But that's really, Martin, maybe you remember, that's a question of accounting versus costing we had
Yes.
a long time ago. And
it's basically existed since the very day this way of accounting things. Well, ever since we implemented that, it's been a subject of heated discussions. Let's put it this way.
yeah,
And it's really, as Michi already said, like it's a matter of costing versus accounting. And obviously accounting, there's not one set of accounting rules in the world, and we just opted for this particular one. And I mean, at this point, if we changed it, it would be like admitting defeat, losing face, so we can't do it anymore. So we just have to keep this method that we have right now. I mean, we're aware what the issue is that people see with it. So fun fact, many years ago, I wrote a prototype or a small, I don't know, these days you would probably call it a game jam or something that I did for myself. And I wrote a quick prototype of a business simulation game. And in that prototype, I actually had a thing that computed for inventory the actual book value and a computed value, basically. So, and the computed value contained all sorts of things, horribly complex to compute, because that prototype already had transport and whatnot. And if you really want to be correct about it, there's all sorts of things that have to go into that value, right? If you want to get like a good feeling for, okay, how much money have I invested to arrive at this product in this state? And that's actually also why we opted against doing it in Prosperous Universe, because it's basically a slippery slope, right? The very moment you decide to value something, there's going to be 10 different ways in which you can do that. And that's essentially the underlying reason why we're having this pretty simple, pretty drastic way of doing it. If you produce something in accounting terms, you've ruined the input materials. And what sort of value you get out of the result is at that point pretty much open. Like, you could lose that to a pirate, or you could sell it at an exorbitant price to someone who doesn't know better. So, who knows?
Yeah, bottom line is we are not going to change the current mechanism.
Yes, that's basically it.
Okay. Slomes asks, is military operations of any form or shape still off the table? Still think it's a great resource, think for the late game. Yes, I think it's still off the table. We can talk about that in a bit when we talk about the future of Prosperous Universe. But the military component is off the table at the moment.
Off this table.
Off this table?
Never mind. You put it on a different table. Actually, that don't get me wrong. Like that implies all sorts of things. It wasn't supposed to. No, we're not planning anything on different table. I was just saying that I wouldn't completely rule out anything that contains the term military, but how and when is very, very much open.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's off the table.
All right, let's talk a bit about the future, and then we can come back to any questions that arrive in the meantime. So, what's next, Martin?
I have to talk about that.
You're the boss here. At least you can do the introduction, and then we can talk about the individual topics.
Technically, I'm the boss, yes, on paper. Slave to my employees. What's next? So a while back, I posted a report, and at this point, pretty rare contribution to our devlog, in which I announced that we had secured new funding for a new funding project. And just for explanation's sake, if I say funding, I'm not talking about some investor who's putting money into the company, because in that regard we're still very much independent and have nobody besides myself who's invested in the company. But Germany has a very attractive games funding scheme, which means that for any, at least at our size, for any project that we do and that sort of meets their criteria, we get a 50% subsidy to all the project cost, which in our case obviously is staff expenses. So the salaries that we pay ourselves are the project costs, and 50% of that gets covered by the state. And so for the past few years, this has been, for better or worse, an important part of Simulogic's financing, and it continues to be so. So we're very, very happy that we got this funding, and obviously we get this funding for a project, and that project internally has the working title Prosperous Universe, Politics and Infrastructure. And the general idea here is that over the next 12 months, so the project literally, like on paper, or officially started 7 days ago, and it's going to go on for 12 months. And over that time frame, we are going to address or tackle 3 important components. The first one is going to be a rather technical one, namely the localization, or rather internationalization of the game, meaning we're finally going to implement or support having the game in different languages. So parts of that already exist, have been built into the game from day one, basically, but it's never been used. There's no pipeline for it. There's no a lot of things are not internationalized just yet, so that needs to be done. Obviously, we haven't talked about all the things, all the implications that come from that. Okay, so how do we deal with a multilingual community? What gets released where and how, and all these sort of things are going to get sorted out over the next few weeks and months, I guess. But that's kind of our first thing that's part of that project, in part because the funding regulations require the game to be available in German, so we didn't really have much of a choice here, did we? The second part is going to be one of the 2 namesake things. So it's politics, which is sort of a broad term, right? We have plenty of politics in Prosperous Universe, that's for sure. So what does that feature actually bring? And basically what we saw, or what we hear a lot from the community, is that the current political features that we have in the game are woefully insufficient, especially in terms of how money gets collected and spent and distributed and all that. So it's a very, very hacky way this works right now, which is sort of stems from the fact that we had different ideas for how politics in the game would work. Like initially we thought it would be much more focused on the corporations, and then over time it just it became pretty obvious that that's not how it's going to go in Prosperous Universe, at least. So this feature is basically going to how would you say it, give more structure to politics. So what's going to happen is that we're going to introduce proper government entities for all planets. Those exist either way. So if you have to pay taxes or anything on a planet, then that's where the money goes. It goes to the government. And then there's also going to be election. Like there are going to be political representatives, very similar to how it is today. I mean, today you have the one governor who has to take care of things, and for smaller planets that's going to stay that way, so you can vote for a governor. But the larger the planet is, starting at a certain threshold of players on a planet, we are actually going to introduce a sort of parliament, meaning there's going to be always an uneven number of people in that parliament. And the political decisions or the political activities, they are not going to be that transparent, someone does something and no one can really check what happened thing, but rather there's going to be a system, a properly structured system for something that we call motions, meaning that whoever is a member of the parliament, or maybe just the governor, I'm not sure details, is going to be able to launch those motions, and then if there is a parliament, the members of that parliament have to vote on those motions, and if they get accepted, then things happen, and that obviously gives much more structure to political processes. It gives a much higher level of transparency for everyone else, because obviously from the outside you're going to see what those motions were, what happened over time, what changed when, and all of that. So that should really improve the political tool set by quite a bit, and make managing and administrating those planets a lot better. And then the third part of the funding project is going to deal with the other namesake, which is infrastructure. And the basic idea here is that we're going to introduce, emphasis on introducing, like we talked a lot about moving other stuff into this new framework and whatnot. It's complicated. We might get to that a bit later, but we're going to add infrastructure projects that provide some sort of benefit to the players. So the things that are currently on the top of our list are space stations and space elevators. So everyone can sort of imagine what those would be useful for. And these infrastructure projects, the new thing about those is going to be that you can either build them privately, or you can have the government build them, or rather request them to be built. So it's more like in reality we'd probably call it a tender or public-private partnership or whatever, all sorts of terms for that. But the idea is that there's infrastructure that the government decides that they want to have it, and that they're going to pay for it too, and they're going to have the players, operations, individual players, whatnot, have contribute to those projects. And then, of course, once that infrastructure exists, someone also has to maintain it, has to operate it, provide the upkeep. And here, with this new politics infrastructure system that we have in mind, this is not going to be one of those players have to chip in and donate sort of things, but rather it's going to be the government decides who's going to provide for this upkeep, and they get compensated for that service, basically. But that's just, and there's funny flowcharts and charts in general that Fabian has prepared that look very let's call it not overwhelming, but very interesting, very complex, because there's all sorts of things that come out of these interactions. I mean, there's taxes, there's fees, there's subsidies, there's the regular compensation, and then there's private infrastructure, public infrastructure that's privately operated, and all these sort of things. Like there's a whole lot of things that come out of that that gives rich content to mid and end game. Yeah. Basically, there's a lot of stuff to do with that new politics system. I hope that summed it up all right, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be some questions about that. Did I miss anything, or did I cover all the most important bases?
I think those are the most important things, right?
Yeah.
And what's important for me is that the new politics system will be can be used as a foundation. Right now we are talking about planetary governments, but we also imagine system-wide governments or sector-wide governments, or even faction representatives or something like that. But on a level we're talking about planetary governments, right?
Yeah, this project is just about the planetary governments, and then of course you can escalate that.
Circling back to the first part of the project, the translation part, there's a question. Is it going to be just in German? No. German, we have the requirement to release the game in German. That means that all the things that we do from now on will be in English as usual, and in German as well. So there's no German exclusive content or something like that.
Yeah, and then there's also, I don't know, maybe the question was actually aiming at another angle.
Okay.
So if you know airlines, in, for example, our other project where we have had internationalization for basically forever, the way it works is that English and German are officially ported languages. I mean, besides this whole requirement thing that we have to have it in German, let's also keep in mind that Germany is actually a pretty big market, especially for the type of game that we do. So it can't hurt to have it. But what I was trying to say is that we obviously, sooner or later, we're going to accept community translations, I think. So if someone wants to translate the game in Kiswahili or Farsi or Chinese or you name it, then you're invited to help out. Like, we have a pipeline for that. We have the tools for that. We're going to have the processes for that at some point.
I mean, it works really well in airlines, and we just don't have it yet for Prosperous Universe.
Exactly. Yes.
Another question: will you relax the one player can only be governor of one planet rule, especially for small planets? Yes. We talked about that just today, and we think we'll drop the rule. It just doesn't make any sense to be only politically active on one planet at one time. And the goal is, if you have the time to manage multiple planets and be in the government of multiple planets, then we will not stand in the way anymore. Or any longer. And one thing that we are also addressing is the whole, Martin mentioned it, but I want to be explicit, that is addressing the issue that players found corporations just for the sake to collect taxes and make the whole tax handling easier. So as Martin said, tax handling, taxes will go to the government, and then the local elected officials can create motions to spend that money. And the government will have its own accounting and stuff like that, so all the financial screens should work. And maybe we should mention...
it will also persist between governments. We should also mention that. Like, if the whole government changes, then you still have that government account. Just different people have access to it.
Yeah, and the way we imagine it working in the game itself right now is that you can play the game with multiple contexts. For example, the default context would be your company context. You have your company screens you created and all commands that you are used to. And then if you are governor of a government, or somehow related to the government, then you can switch context to that government, and then you have a whole new set of screens that you can configure and use. So there's no mix-up between the company and your role as a governor or elected official or whatnot. And then you can handle the government stuff from your own set of different separate screens.
Just want to mention that Brandon Turner said awesome, 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 and I appreciate that. What else? Will everyone have the same? Will everyone have the same system? I think, George, you have to clarify what you mean by that question. Will everyone have the same system, or everywhere? In the meantime, maybe there's some other questions that we can already answer.
Yeah, there was a question about, totally unrelated to what we just talked about, but when are we going to allow to bundle multiple commodities into one shipment, for example, or in one contract? I'm not sure. I would like to have that feature as well, but to be honest, it's not on any immediate roadmap at the moment. But I see the value of it. I see it. Oh, interesting topic. Yeah, what did you want to say, Martin?
I just saw that question about embezzlement, which is
Okay.
it's interesting. It's one of the first questions that come up.
I mean, it's kind of possible, but I guess the people you're governing will see that you passed the motion to embezzle the money. So
Yeah.
Which is not that unrealistic, I guess. Like most of these things are actually public
yeah,
in the real world, and people just can't do anything about it. If you give the contract to your best buddies, then well,
Yeah.
what are you going to do about it? Vote him out of office? Haha, good luck. Anyway, let's not get political.
Will the voting system get changed? One player, one vote, or weighted based on population? I think we still would have the one player, one vote system, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too.
yeah.
And you also have only a vote if you have a base on the plant, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, Vetternwirtschaft, exactly.
Vetternwirtschaft would be a nice release title.
Yeah, yes. Let's just call it embezzlement, shall we? To make it a bit more international.
Okay, there's one question or statement. Currently, free players have zero interactions with other players outside of the commodity exchanges. Are there plans to change that, considering the game is advertised as MMO? That's a good point. And one or two weekly meetings ago, we talked about that in the team. And the thing is, we want to make other players more visible, and having the leaderboards is one step into that direction. And we have other ideas as well, but we see the problem that you can be lonely in Prosperous Universe, and you can just play it for your own, basically treating everyone else as an NPC. That's entirely possible. Yeah, we're aware.
Well, I like that question. There is no storage cost for sell orders on the CX. Is that by design? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is at the moment, I guess. So we're well aware of the fact that you can exploit the commodity exchange as free storage. I mean, this might change at some point. So right now the commodity exchange is sort of without an alternative for many. I mean, as we just talked about, like for free players, that's kind of the only way to interact or to trade without restrictions. So it's sort of important that this always works. But I could very well see that changing in the future as commodity exchanges become more flexible. So one of the things that we also just touched again today is that down the road we're going to see commodity exchanges that are player driven, like as basically a long-term extension of the politics system. There might also be commodity exchanges that you build yourself, and those will of course have to have the respective physical representation in the game world. So if you want to allow a certain volume of trade, then you have to have the respective facilities in place and stuff like that. And in such cases, of course, limits make sense. And then, of course, we could also consider having those similar restrictions on public commodity exchanges, depending on commodity or something like that. But I mean, that's all very speculative. It's far into the future. And as you can see, Fabian is not taking any notes, so probably not going to happen. So.
In fact, I have some of those things already down as notes. So
I expected notes.
It's a regular topic kind of over the years.
Will the rulers be able to print money? People are going all in the wrong direction here. I think this. At this point, I'm not sure whether this political feature was a good idea. Not yet. I mean, as we said, the political features initially are going to be limited to planets, which, I don't know, probably somewhat equivalent to a city council in the real world, I guess. So there's no money printing there. But as we said, like, we see this grow over the years, up the levels, maybe intermediate levels, like as Michi said earlier, sector systems, whatever. But eventually, I definitely see there to be a faction government of some sort composed of, let's say, the governments of or the governors of all the planets or something like that, where some decisions in that regard could be made, but hasn't been designed yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I could definitely. It would be nice to have a little bit of movement in the foreign exchange market, because one faction decides to print money and others don't, and you would probably see those effects, and it would be very interesting. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, let's not turn this in a market maker discussion.
Too late.
Oh no, I said it.
I think someone always said it. Like, it's a pointless question since anyone can print money right now. See, there you have it.
Yeah. Will we be able to assign images for ships? Something to fill that no image assigned box. That is like 5 years old, that box. And that was the young me thinking that we would have a dynamic ship editor at some point, and then we would use the 3D image of that ship editor to fill in that image. But that hasn't realized yet. I'm not saying that it won't happen ever in the future, but yeah, at some point. But we talked about that as well a while ago, and having icons or logos for corporations, companies, users, whatnot, is definitely something we want to have, because it adds a bit of flavor to the game. Players can express themselves and present their company and stuff like that.
Players can buy Pro to use it.
Yes,
that
as well. Yeah.
I'm here for a reason, right? I'm the boss. I'm not usually involved much in the day-to-day development of Prosperous Universe, but they invited me here, so they're going to hear the boss stuff, I guess.
Okay. So it's like almost an hour with 5 or 6 minutes left. I'd say ask some questions, we'll answer it, and then we'll end the live stream. So this is your chance. Oh, did we forget to tell anything about politics in the infrastructure? I'm not sure, but I think we covered it.
Do you expect there will be any faction-specific motions to further differentiate the factions? That means sort of once we have a faction-level politics system? I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have faction politics at some point, then of course there's going to be topics being voted on that are relevant to the faction, and those things are going to be things like faction tax rates and faction tariffs, and I don't know.
I read that more as some motions are only available if you're a planet of a certain faction.
Aha.
Which is an interesting idea, but in like the ground rules have to be laid first. So basically, implementing all the motions that you absolutely have to have as a government to be able to govern, and those will all be the same. And then once we get to the whole faction level and gamey stuff, we can think about those differentiations more.
When is it coming? Oh, those are the tough questions.
Probably coming in multiple steps, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, that's for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
So we won't be gone for a year and then pop up with a release
Yeah.
suddenly.
But we will be gone for the next couple of weeks. It's
Yeah.
basically vacation season, so don't expect much in the next 3 weeks or so.
Yeah. Okay, now there's the questions coming because we're closing in on the hour. Let's go through them as quickly as we can. Can we get ticker on the top of the screen for political events?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe not a ticker on top screen, but we talked about a news command where you could like have, or where the different events being shown, and you could filter it, for example, by region or faction or other things like what it's about, basically.
The ticker could have price changes too. I mean, that would be a little bit noisy. I think we have thousands of price changes, so it's maybe not all that useful. Any chance we'll be able to list free shipping space to local markets? I think that has to be explained, at least to me. Maybe Michi and Fabian know what this means.
I mean, that's
And
the inverse of a... Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's basically the inverse shipping contract where you offer shipping space and then someone else can say, okay, I want that space during that time, and here's my container, basically.
Available shipping space. Okay.
Yeah.
Free to me always means it doesn't cost anything.
Okay. That's up to the provider, I guess.
True.
Yeah, that's also something that regularly comes up and is like on the sometime in the future list somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, given that we have a commodity and a foreign exchange, we might as well have a transport or shipping, what's it called, freight exchange at some point. Would definitely be feasible. Individuals in the community have been working together to build things like ships and unit prefab buildings for other players. Do you plan to support these individuals in game more effectively? Also, love the game. Thank you very much.
That totally depends on how you imagine we could support them in the game. I'm assuming you're talking about corporations like GTU, for example. Or are you talking about advertisements? GTU could post their ads to a global bulletin or something like that. Buy our ships.
Something like that. What else? I just want to burn Prometo down. Okay, noted. Commodity exchange order sorting. Please, please, please.
Will there be some sort of tech research in the future? I don't think so. Not in the near future, anyways. I could imagine that we have some buildings that can get progressively better, for example, to produce certain recipes more efficiently, or I don't know what. But it's always dangerous to have these without a downside, because older players benefit from it obviously more than new players, and that's always a problem. And we could also read into that question, for example, that all the players together could work together in some sort of tech research to unlock new recipes, buildings, or ship parts or whatnot. That would be possible as well, but I think it's just not feasible at the moment with our currently very limited dev time, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like something where you need to provide perpetual content in the long run.
Yeah.
Once you have a universe that's just persistent forever, you need to layer new research stuff on top once it has been unlocked.
I mean, we talked about that in the past. For example, we could add new sectors to the map, for example, and not just add them with an update or so, but design a whole system around it. For example, players have to create some sort of jump gate or I don't know what, and then explore the new territories. And that sounds fun and everything, but it's like a one-time event, and it kind of uses up a lot of our dev time for that one-time benefit. So it sounds interesting, but it's expensive, so to speak. Maybe if we have more devs at some point in the future.
I hear a question that has been basically doubled. Anything planned to incentivize settling the further reaches of space? It's a question very close to my heart. Like, it's something that we just had this discussion today in our game design call about the general goals for Prosperous Universe, and so one of the criteria that we have sort of as a success condition, okay, we reached what we want to reach, is that there is actually there is progression in the game that you can. Some players can go out to the middle of nowhere and found a new colony, so to speak, and make it into something that is up to the standards of a standard starting world or starting planet. And if we manage to do that, then we succeeded. So there's definitely a lot of thought going into that and trying to make that happen.
Yeah, follow-up question to that is, what's the current plan to deal with the ghost plots on planets? It feels like there's no real reason to leave the core worlds. They are better than the outside. Yeah, that's true. And that's just how we designed this universe. And I for sure would try a different setup with the next universe. Where the starting worlds are not that interesting. I mean, they have to work, so new players can produce commodities and sell them. So the starting worlds would still have to be very close to the commodity exchanges, so new player can make the run to sell the stuff and get new supplies and everything. But for the next universe, we should strive for a setup that allows let's call it pockets of habitable. Okay, you know what I mean. Martin, help me out. Say it.
Habitability.
Thank you. That's what I meant.
Habitability. I don't know if that's even a word.
Yeah, I'm not sure as well. But basically, certain areas of planets or systems that almost look like a starting system and will later in the game, as the universe progresses, basically just be like any other starting world.
My rather radical proposition for this problem is that there's just not going to be habitable planets anymore at all. But I'm not sure whether that's going to make the cut. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it would definitely make terraforming a very attractive endgame feature, wouldn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Do you plan to add moons?
No.
Not yet.
I mean, the thought has crossed my mind, at least for, like, basically from the very beginning, it must have, right? but think about it. A moon is basically just another small planet. And the only thing it would really add is that you have more planets.
Yeah.
And we don't have a shortage of planets, let's put it this way. It's the problems lie elsewhere, I guess. I mean, maybe the low gravity would be somewhat interesting or helpful, maybe for transport or logistics reasons, but
Yeah.
let's leave that to space stations, shall we? Someone is asking about a date for a reset. Ugh.
Not anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, what the Iron Fist 95 is saying there, it pretty much goes into the general idea that we've had for the Outer Rim, the No Man's Land, whatever you want to call it, from day one. Basically, is that you can go out of the core worlds, and by doing so, you gain some advantages, like not having to pay certain taxes, fees, or whatever, because there's simply no government, there's no infrastructure. At the same time, you basically have certain downsides, or yeah, because you're in the middle of nowhere. So that's definitely what we're going to. It's definitely going to be a part of politics going forward, like the trade-off between. I mean, just like in the real world, like, do you want to have a very powerful government that reaches into a lot of aspects of the economy and tries to balance things out, or do you have a government that doesn't matter at all, and anything in between? And of course, if you are somewhere in the middle of nowhere, then there might not be any government in the first place, and that might have some advantages for some people, for some businesses.
All right. Should we answer one more question?
I think someone is just describing our thinking behind space stations plus space elevator.
Yeah.
Michael T gets it. Yeah. All right.
All right. Then thank you all for tuning in, and see you in Apex.
Yes, and if you haven't gotten your question answered today, then of course you know where to find us. And please don't forget to extend your Pro subscription. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Have fun trading.